people. She is talking about ghosts hanging around what some say is a real-life haunted house in Metro Detroit.
Haunted houses pop up all over the place this time of year.
A new Wall Street Journal report profiles the many parents who think they can see ghosts, specters, and mysterious movements on their advanced baby monitors.
I freaked out. I stopped what I was doing and I ran upstairs and I grabbed my daughter.
Heather says this so-called ghost scratched her daughter Lily and attacked her too.
You are tuned in to the Ghost Signal. Hello, dear listeners, spirits, and specters, and good morning or evening wherever you are across the 24 time zones, and welcome to the Ghost Signal. If this is your first time finding the signal, welcome aboard. But if you are returning for more, welcome back. For those of you who don't know, this is a podcast where I tell tales of ghostly phenomena from around the globe. This is episode 8, The House That Screams Part 2. If you haven't listened to episode 2 yet, I highly recommend that you do, or you probably won't understand what's happening. Then we have a ghostly little tale by one of the Ghost Signal's own signal modulators, Tori Miller, in which she describes her experience with a rather stompy spirit. A few announcements before we begin. If you have a true ghost story for the Graveyard Shift segment, or a twisted tale of terror for the Light in the Attic Patreon segment, please send it to theghostsignalpodcast@gmail.com or visit theghostsignalpodcast.com and submit them there. If I read it on the show and you include a mailing address with your submission, I will send you a Ghost Signal sticker, a 3 a.m. sticker, and some other stuff. It'll be pretty cool, I promise. Spread the word. Come on, you know you want to. The Ghost Signal Patreon is live if you so wish to contribute to the show in that way. There is a $1 tier called the Spirit tier, where you can listen to episodes ad-free on the same day as the regular episode releases. And there is a $5 tier called the Spectre tier, in which you also gain access to ad-free versions of the episodes, but also a Light in the Attic, where I narrate creepypastas from all across the internet, and a short video where you can take a peek behind the curtain of the Ghost Signal. Are you a spirit or a spectre? Go to www.patreon.com/The Ghost Signal Podcast and choose the tier that's right for you. There is also a Discord server for the Ghost Signal. Discord is free to join, so feel free to jump in anytime to say hi and interact with other listeners who share a taste for the paranormal. Go to theghostsignalpodcast.com and scroll down until you see the link. Click on the link, then click on the Join Server button, then click on the Join Now button and you're in. Soon there will be community gaming where you can join me and others for a rousing game of Resident Evil, or other such titles. So download the Discord app, create your free account, and come hang out with us on the Ghost Signal Podcast server today. Onwards to content. When we left Steven LaChance and his 3 children, they had just fled their house on North Christina Avenue in Union, Missouri. The house had come to life with nobody in it, while a monstrous clown seemed to stalk its empty halls. At first glance, one could be forgiven thinking that the end of their torment had come, but the sad reality is that the nightmare had just begun. Pull your sheets up tight and get ready for the continuation of The House That Screams. Prepare for dead air.
Dead air.
When we left Steven and the kids, they had fled their house and were sitting in their car at the top of a nearby hill, waiting for his parents to arrive. It didn't take long before there was a knock on the window. It was Steven's father. He asked if everyone was okay in a frantic voice. "I think I'm losing my mind," was Steven's response. His father assured him of his sanity before saying, "Let's go figure this out." Steven was accompanied by his father, mother, and brother as they walked through the unlocked door. His mother began to remark that something didn't feel quite right just before all the color drained from her. Steven explained to her that she was experiencing the same electrical feeling he does. She immediately stated that her grandchildren would never set foot in the house again and proceeded to take the kids back to her house. The three men then went upstairs to gather some necessities. As he was packing clothes, a putrid, rotting odor came over them, acting as a distraction. It was at this moment Rita, his sister-in-law and surrogate mother to the kids, came to the house and walked into the living room. She called out that his mom had taken the kids home. His father was in the midst of responding when he was interrupted by a blood-curdling woman's scream. The three ran downstairs thinking it was Rita, but she was just standing there terrified. She, like Steven's father and brother, were now believers. When the screaming had subsided, Steven heard something else much more disturbing. He asked Rita to hold her breath. Terrified to tears she did, and that's when they both heard heavy breathing coming not from somewhere else in the room, but directly between them, and they were standing shoulder to shoulder. "Steven, get your things, we're leaving now," his father said sternly as he consoled Rita and got her into his truck and left. As Steven left the house with his brother, he turned to lock the front door when he heard an odd rustling in the trees above them. His brother saw them first. He looked at Steven with wide eyes and whispered, "They're in the damn trees." Another rustling. Then something blacker than night jumped to a low branch right in front of them, almost as if it wanted a better look. But the brothers had a different plan. "Run!" Steven and his brother sprinted for the car, chased by whatever was in the trees and peeled out of there, never looking back. That night at his parents' house brought the most horrific nightmares of his life. By the morning he was determined to get some answers from his landlord. He needed to know what the hell was happening to his family. Mr. Winters was a strange old man. He insisted that the house was not haunted, but when he met with Steven that afternoon, he brought a woman named Lillian with him who was sensitive to spirits, maybe even more. She told Steven that when he feels the electrical feeling in the house, that's when the spirit is with him. Mr. Winters was visibly trying to mentally suppress what he had just heard when he laid out the terms of Steven's breaking the lease, which was basically that another family would have to take it over before he could go. Steven's one stipulation was that he wanted the new tenants to not have children. They both agreed to the terms, and within a month the house had new tenants and Steven was free. He rented a duplex not far away, being attracted to the fact that it was a new construction. It was a house without history. It was perfect. Time passed and life went on as it had before. The nightmare, it seemed, was completely behind them. In the 3 years since they left the screaming house, they had not experienced one single event. But that's not to say there weren't any lasting effects. Steven was having recurring nightmares nearly every night. At the behest of his parents, he agreed to participate in a sleep study to figure out what was happening. The test revealed that Steven was suffering from sleep apnea, and that he stopped breathing for a few seconds about once a minute, preventing him from entering deep sleep. "Well, what about my nightmares?" he asked. The lab technician looked at him sideways. "Nightmares? With this type of sleep deprivation, you shouldn't be experiencing any kind of dreams or nightmares." That explanation didn't make them stop. In fact, they only gained in intensity. After one particularly lucid nightmare, he decided to get the story out of himself by way of typing it out, all of the experiences and terror that he and the children had endured. It only took him an hour. After he completed his narrative, however, he wondered what he should do with it. He gave it some thought and decided to post it to a few paranormal websites. And the next morning, he had nearly forgotten about the events of just a few hours prior. When he checked his email inbox, he saw over 100 emails from people who offered every variation of advice of how to deal with the paranormal possible. Some said that spirits can't hurt you, others said they can. Some said ghosts are just people without bodies, Still others said that all ghosts are demons pretending to be people, so Steven didn't know what to believe. So he came to his own conclusions, which through the magic of internet chat rooms met a woman named Sheila who not only shared his beliefs, but lived just up the road in St. Louis. And through Sheila he met Helen. Sheila asked him if she could drive by the house just to take a look. Steven told her that he thought Mr. Winters turned the house into a dog kennel a while back, but that did not deter her. When she got into town, she called Steven to explain that she drove up and down Christina Avenue, but could not find the house. But she did find a large white house where the dog kennel was supposed to be, but instead found a woman standing in front. Sheila stopped her car and walked up to the lady, explaining that she was looking for a white house that was supposed to be really haunted. The woman replied that she must be talking about her house, because it's very haunted. Her name was Helen March. It was when Sheila gained permission to take pictures of the house that she noticed that there were 2 children living there. Helen had lived a rather complicated life. She was a single mom of 3 girls when she met Charlie, who himself was a single father of 4. They got married, and by the time they needed to find a place to settle down, it was them, 2 of their older children, their teenage daughter, and a grandchild all living in one trailer. Helen was looking through newspaper ads without much hope when she saw the same ad that Steven had seen 3 years prior, and without a second thought placed a call to Mr. Winters. Sheila put Helen in touch with Steven, and this began one of the darkest chapters in both their lives. After Helen relayed some of her experiences to him, he realized that many of them mirrored his own with a few exceptions. Phantom phone calls to the police reporting suicides, the gutters mysteriously catching on fire, and the transformer in front of the house blowing up every few months. They decided to go to the library and research the history of the house, where the librarian seemed to be actively hindering their progress, like she was hiding something. Workers at the courthouse were doing the same thing while they were researching deeds. They eventually discovered the history outlined in episode 2, but were skeptical. Were these actual facts, or just rumors and folklore? The activity in Helen's house was getting worse. Looking for answers, they turned to a psychic named Betty who gave ghost tours at the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis. They agreed to meet with Betty after one of her tours, so off to St. Louis they went. After the tour, Betty listened to their stories and decided that she needed to see the house for herself. On their drive back to Union, they joked that Betty was in for the shock of her life. About a week later, the time had come for Betty and her male assistant Lee, Helen, and Steven to conduct a first paranormal investigation at the Union Screaming House. Things were tense at first, but nothing out of the ordinary happened. Then they all went upstairs. They were walking through the breezeway at the back of the house when a cold burst of energy lifted Betty off of her feet about 3 inches and then threw her against the wall. After she regained her composure, Betty instructed Helen and Steven to wait for them downstairs. They could hear Betty's EMF detectors going haywire all through the 2nd floor, but when Betty and Lee went to the basement, the devices went ballistic. When they were through, they told Helen that there's a mean old man upstairs that hates everyone and a powerful vortex, a concentration of spiritual energy where the dead can come and go as they please, was in the basement and to stay away from it. Then they left, never to contact either Steven or Helen ever again. Well, great, Steven said, back to square one. For weeks and months following, Helen called Steven constantly, asking for him to come over and help her to deal with the ever-growing entity in her house. Phantom babies hanging upside down in the trees, disembodied animalistic growling, along with the usual footsteps and shadow figures. It seemed to be getting more malevolent, and Helen needed help. So Steven convinced Helen to bring in paranormal investigators to help. At this time in 2004, TV shows like Ghost Hunters, Paranormal State, and Ghost Adventures were gaining in popularity, and the number of investigation groups exploded. So Steven didn't have problems finding groups, just finding good groups. He tried dozens of them, some well-meaning but clueless, some that were hostile to Helen and her house, some that just came to party and get drunk, and one that performed rituals in the basement. One even went so far to accuse Helen's daughter Kelly of practicing witchcraft, and that the problems with the house stemmed from that. They had so-called psychics giving stories that never matched up, and not one person that ever came to the house seemed to want to help. All they wanted to do was stir things up, get evidence on camera, and leave. Helen and Steven were at the end of their ropes. Not seeing anywhere else to turn, he decided to form his own group, Missouri Paranormal Research, or MPR. It would be himself, a psychic named Alex and his sister, a photographer named Mary, a man named Mark who had a bunch of surveillance equipment, and a sensitive named Carol. They vowed not to close a case until their client had closure, and Helen was client number 1. Bet you didn't think there was going to be a part 3, but alas, there is. What will become of Helen and her haunted house? Will Steven's new group be able to find the answers they desperately need? Stay tuned, the answers are closer than you think. Now for some ghostly goings-on at an orthopedic clinic where the dead just won't stop walking about. From signal modulator Tori Miller comes the story of the stomper on the roof. Time to clock in for the graveyard shift. My co-workers always joke that we worked in haunted places. Working within the orthopedic industry, there were always bound to be some areas that would be home to cadavers. These bodies always came in all sorts of conditions, whole, partial, or just a limb. Speaking of limbs, I remembered working in one part of the building that housed the most cadavers for our company. It was one part office and the other part was a cadaver lab where they would test out orthopedic parts. Working the late shift, these stiffs served as boon companions for those late nights doing IT work. I noticed an occurrence one night where if you look up while you are in the lobby of this building, you can hear bodies stomp on the roof. It would sound distant, but it definitely didn't sound mechanical. I did my own investigations when I could by mainly hearing and trying to discern a rhythmic pattern to debunk it. While I dismissed it most nights thinking I needed some additional sleep, something within me felt like I was able to feel their presence. I am religious, but not the book thumper dogma type. Rather, being a pagan has allowed me to use my feelings and intuition to allow me to discern what is unexplainable. While the lobby wasn't the most creepiest offender on campus, the back hallway that led to the cadaver refrigerator was. I've noticed that if I was looking for a package out on the dock for too long, the chest tightens and you feel all sorts of eyes on you. I try not to stay out there too long after the sun goes down. Worst yet about this particular haunt is that this activity happens even in the daytime. Once I start walking around the lobby, you can definitely hear foot stomps on the roof. I did point this out to one coworker, but he was a bit of a jackass about it. Guess he wasn't the type to believe in ghosts, but that honestly did not stop my investigation. I asked around to other more friendlier types, better coworkers, security guards, and a few food workers. The main consensus was that this building had not only some weird vibes, but definitely some weird noises coming from it. The security guard confirmed the foot stomping for me and even added more data for my investigation. Above the lobby, there was actually a crawl space. She was able to recreate the foot stomps herself until she got interrupted by the ghost doing the act better than she did. The food worker who talked to me claimed that if you put your ear up to the wall, you can hear distinct scratches from the ghosts. I didn't have time to put that up to the test, but honestly wondered what could be heard if I did that. My co-workers laugh about how ghosts aren't real. I'll just tell them to not look up. Stompy little spirit stomping about. If you heard loud disembodied stomping, dear listener, would you charge in like Rambo and try to catch it in the act? Or would you just chalk it up to the random, albeit unsettling sounds buildings make sometimes? Now for a little story of my own, added in for no extra charge. This past Christmas I went to visit my parents as one does during the holidays. While I was there, my mother told me a weird little story about something that happened to her. She had ordered 2 little tin Christmas trees that were basically festively decorated cones with cookies inside and a wind-up music box for a base. One for herself and one for my uncle. Well, the day had come when those cookies had my mom's name on them, so she went and got her tree. The only problem was she couldn't open it. The music box base was stuck, so she struggled and fought, probably saying a few choice words in the process, and wound up ripping the music box completely out of the base. This is where things get a little weird. The music box played fine before my mom attacked it, but after, the damn thing played backwards, turning whatever song it was meant to play into a strange dissonant dirge. As she finished telling me this, she produces this angry little music box and hands it to me, and I brought it home. So now, dear listeners, I give to you the zombie music box. Not exactly festive. And the worst part about it is when Mom finally got to the cookies, they weren't even that good. Have you, dear listener, ever experienced sights and sounds at your place of employment that can't quite be explained? Would you like to share your story? If you would, please visit theghost-signal-podcast.com and follow the link to email me and I will put it in a future episode. If you would like to be one of the cool kids, visit www.patreon.com/theghost-signal-podcast to gain access to exclusive content. Join the Ghost Signal Discord server and hang out with other listeners from all across the globe. A quick thanks to Tori Miller for the excellent content. The Ghost Signal is executively produced by Jason Wilson. Custom sound beds by J.M. Scherf. Video editing wizardry by Hale. Creative direction by Cassie. And Patreon mastery by Brooks Bigley. And my name is Jeff, your friendly control operator and your ghost host with the most. The next time the Ghost Signal haunts your eardrums, we will examine the story of how Dr. Richard Gallagher, a respected psychiatrist, got involved with authenticating demonic possessions. So until then, dear listeners, spirits and specters, ending transmission. Reach me at theghost-signal-podcast@gmail.com.
This has been a Grey Rooms production. Copyright 2021 and 2022.
The ghost signal is lost. Transmission terminated.